if you lose two of these pillars that you've kind of upheld as this like pedestal of what life is about or how to live your life, then it leaves you scrambling a bit. He says that I'm a ready, fire, aim kind of person, and Daniel is a ready, aim, aim.
What would you say was like one of the hardest parts of losing religion as you knew it?
This is the Lifted Spirits podcast, where we raise a glass, share encouraging thoughts and stories, and discuss how we find meaning in art, business, family, friendship, and everything in between. Today we have Kaleb Belcher, a friend of mine who's closer with my brother, and he has an Airbnb business, and I was impressed by how articulate his life values are and how often he refines them in a very intentional way. And so we'll talk some about his business and his core values and how those have evolved over years. So
here we are again. We're rolling. We've got this, I forget how you even say this, Ohishi whiskey, a sherry cask. It's kind of sweeter type of whiskey. And another one of those Japanese whiskeys. Have you had many Japanese whiskeys?
No, I don't think I have.
I'm a big fan of Japan. I actually just finished an audiobook on why Japan has the best education system.
Okay.
And it was intimidating, to say the least.
Man. I didn't go through that, so I'm just a tear down.
Yeah. They're big on like your kids having a lot more autonomy and doing things for themselves. Yeah. Even the kids, it said, I've never been to Japan, but it said in Japan, kids like walk themselves to school on the subways, and they just have a tag thing that sort of marks them as a school kid, and people help them to make sure they know where they're going. Yeah. And it's like, wow, that is a functional society. Anyway, who are you?
All right. I'm Kaleb Belcher. I have known you for a little while. I probably know your brother better than you, and that's our connection to each other. I can take that any direction, but that's at least my name and our connection.
Yeah. Well, you lived with my brother and still do.
Yes.
Since when?
We have lived together since 2016. So this is
that's a long time. I didn't even know it was that long.
I think August of this year would make that 8 year. Jeez, that's crazy.
That is a long time. He would, I haven't heard him say this in a while, but he used to joke saying like, oh, me and my partner live together.
Yes, we've joked about that a lot, especially when him and I went on the trip to Puerto Vallarta that all of us were on, because it was you and your wife and me and Daniel. So that was, we've made that joke many times. And at this point, I've lived with him longer than anyone, probably except my immediate family, which is also like a funny thing to think about.
Yeah, you might beat me out. I think I only lived with him until I was 16, so you're halfway there.
Yeah, we're working on it.
Still got a while. And then y'all are also business partners to some extent.
Exactly. We like to, really mix all the things together.
Yes.
Live together, share a business, do it all.
Which is mostly like Airbnb and remodeling.
So it's primarily real estate, and that has spanned, right now it is 2 single family houses, a duplex, and an Airbnb that's on our property. So there's the house, and then it's a detached garage with an Airbnb above it. So, and we've kind of done the spectrum of fixing things up and taking them from very, very gross places to less gross that people actually want to live in.
And what was the inspiration behind why you wanted to do that? Was that something you started, or him, or what?
That's probably more me, and something that the way that we got there is I was listening to a podcast as I was finishing grad school, and it was talking about real estate as kind of an alternative method to achieving some financial independence. And I was about to start a full-time job as an engineer, which was a job that I did start immediately after that, but then still do today and enjoy. But I always wanted to do my engineering job or do whatever kind of my main job was only because I enjoyed doing it, not because I had to do it. Yeah. I didn't want to be stuck in a job because, I had debt or, an extravagant lifestyle, and having kind of this real estate piece was a way to offset some of that, where if I wanted to quit my job, if I wanted to, do some other things, or if I got fired or let go, it wouldn't be this like calamitous event. It would be, it's like, oh, okay. Like, I still have this piece, and it's also just much more like nitty gritty. We're, like I said, working on things with our own two hands. And I like that piece. I'm kind of disconnected from that world with my engineering job where I sit at a desk all day. And so I think it was kind of a balancing piece from what my kind of main job was and what some of the things that I enjoyed doing, and how I could kind of bring all of those together in theory at the same time.
Yeah. And what were some of the initial hurdles you ran into when you were just trying to get into that?
So, and I kind of started to touch on this, but Daniel and I, which Daniel is your brother, and we are very, very different people, which has been good in our business partnership, because I tend to be, as Daniel will say, he says that I'm a ready, fire, aim kind of person. And Daniel is a ready, aim, 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 and then eventually fire. And
that's
so
pretty much me too.
Kind of bringing those together was a good piece, but it also brings its hurdles as you kind of learn the ins and outs of, I'm ready to make a decision and Daniel wants to think about it or look into things. And
so what you're saying is the biggest hurdle you ran into was Daniel.
No, it's a learning piece of, I think, being in business in general, because I think you would run into those problems, if it were Daniel and the kind of person that he is, or if it was a person that was just like me and we were just like diving headlong into everything without thinking about anything. I think that would create its own problems. And it was good hurdles to tackle, but there have been hurdles with that, like trying to figure out the like actual real estate piece and then figuring that out with another human being that is not the same as you.
Yeah. I'm similar in being a ready aim person. Even the first podcast I recorded was in July.
Okay.
And we just released it like the first week of January.
Oh, I love that.
And because it took me a long time to get 6. I was trying to get 6 finished, so I was ahead of the curve.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
So it was a little too much pre-planning. And but how did you grow up doing handyman type stuff?
Not directly. My dad is a very hands-on person. He's always worked on the cars. He's always built a lot of the things that we use, or if you had a problem and there was something that we could build to solve that problem, he was ready and willing to do that. So I think kind of the building piece, but it all was internal. There wasn't kind of a entrepreneurial piece to that, which has been much more me as compared to probably the rest of my family.
And what would you say the end goal or dream is of pursuing those businesses?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's probably an evolving question to some degree, because Daniel and I have had the conversation that with this, and this is probably true of podcasting or YouTubing or whatever activity you get, is like, when are you done, or when have you like achieved whatever the goal is? And I said that I wanted to be financially like kind of independent with that. There's a huge range of what that is, and depending on how you let your lifestyle grow, that could be a dream that you're always chasing. So I think for me, it would be something like where it has provided a stable piece, and what specifically that looks like is hard to say. I think in a perfect world, Daniel and I would own like one apartment complex that's like somewhere in the range of like 20 to 40 units, and that's it. And so it's kind of because everything's spread out right now. I think if you could kind of move that into one piece and just have all of your focus be on it, I think that once you really got all the systems down for it, it would be a pretty passive piece that has the potential to still, in theory, make you a decent amount of money.
Yeah.
But getting there is its own challenge, and it's, as you jump from single family homes to a 10-unit apartment, that's big dollar differences and big even like management differences. So the path to getting there is winding, and we'll see what the actual like final result is.
Yeah, I have plenty of business ideas, but then I'll think, but that also requires a lot of money.
Yep.
Unfortunately. And even things like being in the wedding industry, I thought it'd be cool to make a wedding venue, but requires money and planning and stuff, permits and stuff that I have no idea about. And but I think, which also, speaking of wedding venues, another shout out to the Ballroom at I Street. That's where we're at right now. It's a beautiful venue. Done lots of weddings here.
Yep.
And they let us use the space. It's great. I'll put a link to their website in the bio or whatever you call that. Is that what that's even called? No, that's like your bio is like an Instagram.
I think so.
I don't even know all the terms.
Description?
The description.
If it's on YouTube, right?
There it is. Yeah.
Yep.
I just started YouTube this month.
There you go.
Anyway. And so, also, this is, we'll circle back around to some of this real estate stuff because I'm interested in this. But you're also an avid runner.
Correct.
And have you always been running?
For the most part. So I think I started running cross country my freshman year of high school, as it was kind of several of my friends were doing. The coach was someone that I really liked, and I was like, whatever, I'll do this to stay in shape. And one of the things I found out about running very quickly is, as compared to other sports, which are you much of a sports person?
I have fun when I play them, but I don't competitively do anything. We'll put it this way. My total yardage for 2 years of football in junior high was negative 15 yards. Had a fumble and a penalty.
Hey, that's impressive. No, so with some of those sports, even football, there's a lot of hard work, yes, but also a lot of talent that's kind of inherently in it. You either are some ideal form of a football player or you're not. Whereas running in general is much more linear on the front end of how much effort you put in is how much you improve. And that was something that was really appealing because I was kind of like a gangly kid and not very athletic. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, this is like, I'm decent at this. I would definitely not say that I was good, but it was something that I felt like I could be better at than some of the other physical endeavors that I had pursued. So I've been doing it since high school. I didn't run that much in college because engineering kind of took precedence. And every time I told myself I'd run, I had like a test or quiz to study for. But once I finished that, I basically jumped right back in. And since finishing undergrad, I've done a lot of running at this point.
Yeah, I was decent at running, track, not cross country. I could not do long distance. I think I averaged at like second to last on the cross country team. And I had a rivalry with one of my friends, and we were always trying to. I was always trying to beat him because I could never beat him. He'd be close to the last two, and then I finally beat him at one of the biggest races around here, the Chili Pepper. Yeah. The only thing was that he had an asthma attack, but I just like to leave that part out.
And, you take the wins where you can get them.
Yeah, exactly. And same with football. I was decently quick, so they tried a lot of things out for me, and just none of it worked out. Because they're like, Powers, you're fast, you can try this. Yep. And one time they sent me out for kickoff return, and so they kick it off, and I'm like running around, and I think, okay, it's gonna land right here, and it comes down, and it bounces off my helmet, and the other team gets it and makes a touchback or whatever and scores, and they're like, yeah, I think we're not going to try that again. Yep. So I'm something of a sports star.
Yes,
you might say.
That sounds right.
We did lose every game that I didn't play in, which is only because we weren't ahead enough for me to get in there.
You were the magic touch.
Exactly. That's what they needed. And so you put on lots of, or not necessarily put on lots of events, but like you were pretty coordinated in several of the running events around here, right? Like you have a YouTube channel for running.
So, and
plug.
Yes. So I have a YouTube channel
of my subscribers.
Natural State Run Club it's mine and another guy that I work with. We both kind of own and run the channel, and it started as something that we were already running a lot. We were already running a lot of races because it's something that we enjoy. And both of us had moved from Fayetteville to Rogers and Bentonville, respectively. And we're like, okay, there's not really like run clubs up here because we had attended some of the run clubs in Fayetteville. And we're like, well, I guess we'll just start one. And so it kind of started that way. And then, Kevin, the guy that I run the channel with, he started the Instagram, and I was like, hey, I started us a YouTube channel. And he's like, okay, whatever. And so we've kind of used it as a hopefully like self-building process where we get to dabble in YouTube and some of the fun aspects of it. And again, trying to make it something that's just fun so far. And then also getting to, use it basically as an excuse to run more races and interact with more people about running and develop some of the, I think, inherent skills that come with YouTube. So that's kind of like we were already doing it some, and then we just wanted to, I think, expand on it. And I have a problem where every hobby that I do, I somehow decide that I need to turn into at least an attempt at business. So that's my problem that Kevin has been sucked into.
Yeah, I thought the same thing of like, man, I got to start a podcast or a YouTube channel or something because I just spend an obscene amount of time watching YouTube or listening to podcasts. And same with doing video work and wanting to make films one day. It's easy to justify like, oh, I can watch this movie at 3 p.m. on a Thursday because it's for work. Like I'm learning angles and film history and stuff like that. But then part of me is like, but if I do get there one day, it was worth it.
And you're not wrong. I feel like there has been a lot of like watching other running YouTube channels and being like, I feel like I could do this. Like this doesn't seem that hard.
Yeah.
And I've both find that that's been wildly untrue and also true at the same time.
Yeah, and between all your various interests and businesses and things, what would you say you draw a lot of meaning from in your day-to-day life with those things? Because overall, you, I know you decently, but we're not like besties or anything. But you just seem like a very normal dude. Like you're just a guy who works a job, has these side businesses. You're not, and I think sometimes with podcasts and stuff, it's always like the top level, and you listen to it and you're just like, wow, I could never do any of that. And so with all the stuff that you're doing being very attainable, how has it been just like fueling you and giving you drive and purpose?
Yeah, that's kind of a interesting question. Thinking about, I think, meaning in some sense. And I think that's probably an area that you and I at least somewhat overlap, in that it's easy to get a little philosophical about, what is the meaning of all of these things. And, in a lot of senses, whether it's real estate or YouTube or whatever it is, I don't think that I've actually managed to not be super philosophical about them and have just tried to make them be things that I've wanted to do. And that I have kind of said it, and I've said this to Kevin, I've said this to like Daniel, I've told this to my employer as like, listen, I'm here because I enjoy doing this. And the day that this like is consistently not what I enjoy, then I will probably be at least telling you or, submitting my 2 weeks. And so I think for all of those things, they give me varying levels of meaning. I think a lot of my professional meaning kind of is the foundation of where I get a lot of my meaning, in terms of, I feel like I'm doing something that, helps society and makes the world a better place. And I get to do that with people that I enjoy hanging out with and solving problems with. And then all of the other kind of side hustles are filling in all of the gaps that maybe my main job doesn't check.
Which, with your main job, what kind of engineering is that again?
So I'm a civil engineer by degree, but I design water and wastewater treatment plants. So I'm either cleaning your water so you can drink it, or cleaning your wastewater so that it doesn't negatively impact the environment.
Yeah, well, that sounds pretty important.
So I would like to think so.
Yeah.
It's why I chose it. So
Yeah.
I hope that, my brain continues to think that it's important.
Yeah, I think I would rather have clean water than not.
Yeah, that's what, as I try to recruit new engineers, I'm always telling them that in water and wastewater engineers save more lives than doctors. So,
Probably.
you know,
I would not doubt it, especially historically, just
Yep.
like cleaning things up and fixing
Yes.
water sources.
Yeah, going further back, it gets much more drastic. Now it's like, trying to clean the things that are gonna maybe get you sick or give you cancer in like 40 years
Uh-huh.
versus because we've got the baseline is pretty down at this point,
Yeah.
which is good.
Yeah, definitely. Society's come a long way.
That's right.
And I've heard you talk some in recent years about like reassessing just your life values
Yep.
and like making a list. First off, what led to the reassessment, and then why don't you just like share some of those?
Yep. Absolutely. So, I don't know to what depth you're wanting to go
Yeah,
into
you
it,
can
but-
say anything you want.
Okay.
You would want like out on the internet.
Yeah.
You know.
And the internet is a broad place. It's
Mhm.
probably who I'd choose to share it with.
But what's funny is that I've heard that listening to other
Mhm.
YouTube channels that give advice for starting a YouTube channel, they
Yep.
said the good news is like none of your family or friends are going to watch your channel.
Yeah, unless you like really peddle it to them.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely been the case. Is like
Mhm.
if I put something out, unless I like directly share it with my family, like no one watches it.
Yeah.
Which is fine because you're trying to build a like actually interested specific audience,
Uh-huh.
which isn't always your family.
Yes.
So to a little backstory, there is I kind of had two cumulative events that are they're both related to each other. So I got divorced, and then kind of coinciding with that divorce, I was a like practicing Protestant Christian, and at this point, I would call myself a hopeful agnostic.
Mm.
And so I think being back to what I said before is I tend to be at least somewhat philosophical about life. So if you lose two of these pillars that you've kind of upheld as this like pedestal of what life is about or how to live your life, then it leaves you scrambling a bit. And I felt like I needed to redefine some of those things for myself. So that began a journey of trying to figure out what I have been calling my life philosophy, which has been this year we're probably on like year 3 of trying to figure it out and then trying to like refine the pieces as I go through it, and to varying degrees.
Yeah, very fair. I'm sure we're in similar spots too of like I don't know, though usually the terms that I've described is I kind of fluctuate between being an agnostic with Christian leanings or like a Christian with agnostic leanings. But over at the end of the day, just where I'm just going to live a life based on what makes sense and what seems to bring the most human flourishing. And because I've seen enough of everyone has their own take on what they believe this or that religiously, and I think it's not just a materialism to say I'm only going to believe what I can test and experience, because like experience is very mystical and spiritual. It's not just like I'm sitting in a room thinking up of my life philosophy that's totally devoid of any sort of spirituality or like openness to all sorts of things that I don't understand in the universe. But just being cautious of when those things when those beliefs or lifestyles seem to hurt more people than they help. That's where it's like, I don't know about that. I'm out.
I'm skeptical.
Which even a lot of those thoughts, a lot of my friends don't even know where I'm at, or not friends that I'm closer with, but you just assume that people are where they've always been. And one of my friends, Jarrett, he had said, you don't really know someone unless you know them right now. And that's a really good saying.
Yeah, I like that.
Because, like you hope tomorrow I'm talking on the phone with someone that I might do their wedding for, who I went to high school with. And it's just like, oh, what do they think of me?
This could be wildly different than it used to be.
Yeah, exactly.
Huh, that's interesting.
But anyway, share some of like whatever you want to share of your values that you feel like you've been like, these are the tested and true things.
Yep. So I think the main thing that I think I like have somewhat defined my life on, and I would say all of this is subject to change if I feel like I've found something better.
Yeah.
So the main piece is to make the world a better place within my circle. So the church that I used to go to defined your circle as the things that were within your control. So, I can't individually control a lot of things,
The
This is
2024 election.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah.
Exactly. I have very little control over that. We know exactly how Arkansas is going to go voting wise. So whether I agree or disagree with that, it doesn't make a difference. And so it's understanding what I can and can't control. So, going back to my job is like, I can do a good job for the clients that I work for. I can be a good friend. I can try to produce real estate in Northwest Arkansas that I feel like is not shady and not like the just lowest bottom dollar and still livable, and can kind of do all of those things within the realm of what I feel like is my control versus, kind of these amorphous, it's especially in 2024, it's very easy to be caught up in lots of things that are outside of that. And so that was one of the big pieces that, for myself, I was like, okay, that's like, if I was to like give you my one sentence elevator sentence, it's to make the world a better place within my circle. And, then from there's been fragments of other things that I'm still in the process of figuring out. So things that I would still like to define more is charity. So, grew up all of my life being very diligent about my 10% tithing. Once that goes away and you're like, I'm not going to give 10% to a church anymore.
Yeah.
I was like, well, going back to making the world a better place, there's probably some other people that are doing other things. And as an engineer, I have at least some surplus amount of money that I don't need on a like month to month basis. So where do I put that? So that's a piece that is like, I know I want to do, but still want to define. There's some health aspects that is like, I know I want to be healthy, but defining that is also very tricky. So I feel like I already am relatively healthy, but it's like, now how much do you optimize versus just like leave as is? And then that's kind of the high level of the life philosophy. I think there's been a lot of like going through different books and different kind of pieces on like what is a life well lived, and what, if I'm at the end of my life, what do I feel like if I look back I want to have done and achieved? And there are some things on that list. So I don't know if they're my philosophical leanings or just goals at the end of the day. So
yeah. Well, I really like the focusing on things in your control.
Yep.
I think that's a very core value of mine too, because there's just so much you can focus on with the whole world at your fingertips, and you think, well, I can't fix everything. And sometimes maybe the way that I used to be, it's like you can just complain about everything, but not fix anything.
Exactly.
And so trying to just be like, you know what, I'm going to find some problem in the world that I can help and do something about it, and go from there. Because, otherwise, your mind's just off all the time, way off in, DC or in the Middle East. And not that we shouldn't pay attention to these sorts of things, but just getting too wrapped up.
And even just understanding what your actual priorities are and how much time you actually have. So like there are things even here and now, like I don't know how much we had talked about this, but I owned a vending machine for a year and a half. And that was something that I very quickly figured out is like, I don't have the time for this. Like this is, so it's something that I could have like tried to convince was in my control. And in some sense it was, but it wasn't what I enjoyed doing. And so it's also about trying to figure out what your priorities are, given that you have a finite amount of time
Uh-huh.
on this planet, and
Yeah.
how do you use that to actually be satisfied with what you're using it for?
And so maybe walk through the vending machine experience, because I don't know if it was just if it blew up or if you were just like, I don't have time for this, but like that might be a good story of just like a
Yeah.
life story with life lessons learned.
So one day at work, the vending machines that were in our building were for sale, and being the person that I am, that, ready, fire, aim, I called the guy up and we basically set up to buy that machine and then 3 other machines. So it was a good experience in that I learned about having to store product and having to mess with a machine and having to deal with service as people, have expired chips or, other things that happen with the machine. The problem with it is that it's a very limited business model.
Mm.
And, I had bought it 2 years earlier at a time when I was basically making less money at my job. But then as I got progressive raises across those 2 years, all of a sudden I started doing the math and I'm like, this is a stupid use of time. I could, at my company, I can work overtime and be paid for that.
Mm.
It's not just like a set salary. And so I was like, there's always extra work at my job. I could always spend this. It wasn't a crazy amount of time. It was probably 2 to 4 hours a week on average, but it's like, what am I doing? This is this is dumb.
Yeah.
And so eventually I was just like, okay, I just have to put these up for sale because I'm both not enjoying it and it's just not a good use of time.
Yeah.
So that was kind of that process.
Yeah. Yeah. I like someone though who just has an idea and acts on it instead of doing all the planning and watching 6 months of YouTube videos and tutorials of how to do this and what to do if it's all theoretical, and because that's definitely the rabbit hole I get into is should I buy this lens? I'm going to spend the next month like 10 hours every couple of days just watching videos all to decide no, I guess not.
I'm good.
Yeah, I should have just bought it, used it, returned it, and I would have, or just not done anything with it. Been I've already got something that works, and be content.
Yeah, it's a blessing and a curse.
Mm-hmm. And going back to the values thing, you mentioned some other things in there that were really interesting. The staying focused on your circle, the charity thing. So what are there ways that you feel like you've found something that's worthwhile for you, not just financially to be charitable towards, but with your time and energy?
And therein lies some of the question, because this is where you do get very philosophical, where it's do you take a more utilitarian route and give your money to something like malaria nets in Africa, which is a great cause and saves lots of lives, but at the same time it's probably not something that you get to tangibly be a part of.
Yeah.
And that's not inherently a bad thing, because we spend our money all the time and don't always see the direct impacts of it. But at the same time, it's some question of, does it make sense to be the absolutely most efficient with how I spend my charitable money or time? Or is it do something that you feel good about? And I haven't completely figured that out. I am lucky enough to work at a company that they both match my charitable giving up to a point, and then they encourage us to spend our time on things. So that's probably been the main basis of it in recent years of, we do some STEM things with local schools. We do some stuff with, it'd be the Salvation Army. And I've just kind of let that be the default so far. So still to be optimized.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes charities can feel like your money is just disappearing into a massive void. And I got really jaded towards, this sounds awful, but just towards poor people for a long time, because I lived with a bunch and did half house type stuff. And you just like shell out all your time and money and resources, and it still doesn't seem to help people. And one of the things, I had plenty of elements of fundamentalism just in my personality in teens and 20s that were not at all helpful. But one of the things that I'm not saying this is helpful, but most people would think like, oh, I can respect that. I took really literally, people said Jesus said that if someone asks you for something, give it to them. And so like homeless person would ask me if I had any money, and I'd just like, whatever was in my wallet, I'd give it to him. And because I was just very literalistic. And yeah, over time I was just like, I don't regret doing that because it was a good like thought exercise and experience and growing as a person. But I don't know if there's one person of the not just homeless people on the street like holding the sign, because we'd bring a lot of them home to our halfway house, but of all those people, maybe like 40 people that I had somewhat extended amount of time with. I don't know if any of them are doing that great right now, still years later. And it's not that we shouldn't help, but I don't know. I just got kind of jaded.
Yeah, and it's a huge thing. There are so many problems, again, getting outside of our circle. There's so many problems in the world, and even thinking about how to tackle them and what the best way to tackle them can be daunting at the least, and like completely overwhelming at the worst. So I absolutely follow that, where it's like, I feel like I should be doing something, but is it, like you said, is it going to be doing all that much good? And
trying to find more root causes of problems, and or just things that can address that. Like one thing that was one of Alexa and I's goals for this year is to give 1% of the different each wedding we have, and give to the Children's Safety Center around here, because I was like, you can't really argue with that. Like keeping kids safe from abuse, domestic abuse and sexual abuse and those kinds of things. And they do fantastic work. So it's like, I could totally give them money. And because I'm sure they use their resources well, for one, and then the people who, even the management, like, they all deserve to be paid more for the stuff that they do. And I've done several interviews for them, and just listening to the stories, like, you have to deal with that every day, like listening to those stories and helping those kids process things. And it's just crazy that, nonprofits and teachers and all these people that are wildly underpaid compared to other people. And it's like, that's societal priorities I need to get straight.
Absolutely agreed.
And then this is just a random question, but what's a moment or a season in life that you would just love to replay, like where life just felt like you got it, it's good?
It's an interesting question. I don't know that I've been a person that is super nostalgic, and the question to me is a very nostalgic kind of question. So it's a little bit hard, but I think one of the times that I look back on the most was the summer, and I know Daniel was there briefly, but I worked at Camp War Eagle, which is a kids camp around here that is primarily underserved kids that, wouldn't be able to afford to go there generically. And for whatever reason, that summer, and the summer in mind, the staff that I was working with just seemed very, very focused on making it a good experience, or it felt like a very selfless summer, if that makes sense. So, I had kind of what I thought was the way to do it, but it seemed like everyone was on the same page, and it really was about, serving these kids and, trying to do a good job and trying to be helpful and trying to just be like good friends and good, I don't know, like co-counselors. Like, you're dealing with these problems together, and that whole summer they don't let you have your phone as a counselor while you're there. So that was awesome. And it's just you're outside a lot. It's a much more primitive, like, you're in the cabins with no AC, and it's a bunch of like kids that are whining at you, but at the same time it was like the best because of some of those things.
Alexa and I talk a lot about like, man, I wish we could go back to church camp, but just kind of without the church.
Yes.
You know?
And it's kind of
so
undertoned there. So it's just a little church.
Yeah, because it's a blast.
Mhm.
Like going to camp and
Mhm.
being all hot and sweaty and staying up late when
Yeah.
you're a kid, which is like 9:30, but you're
Yes.
just having the time of your life, doing slip and slides in the big bathrooms. We definitely had some fun with that kind
Oh,
of
absolutely.
thing. And then going back to like your values and reassessing those
Mhm.
things, overall, do you feel like you used to be like trying to find values and meaning, that it was very distressing to you, and that you've come to a place of peace, or have you mostly, I don't know, been pretty calm and steady the whole time and just been assessing and like, oh, this works, this doesn't?
I think for the most part, it's been fairly calm. I mean, there were these events in my life that were obviously not calm. A divorce is not calm, and losing your religion, I think, on its own is not a calm process. But I think it was more like the loss of those things that was hard,
Mm.
and then redefining them. I think I was lucky enough to, going back to the circle metaphor, which is basically stoicism.
Mm.
It was at least possible to be like, well, all I can control really is to try to figure out a system that works. And I think that there's probably not a lot of people out there that aren't even thinking about it to the degree that I am. So
Mm.
you're already doing great, Caleb. Like, just trying to, be lenient with myself, that obviously philosophers have been trying to figure out the big why questions for as long as humans have existed. And that's great. And I think it's a worthwhile pursuit, but it's not going to happen in an hour or a day or months or
A lifetime.
years. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a progressive repolishing of what you think it is. And I think kind of going with the stoicism piece, where it's like, okay, I can only control kind of bits and pieces of this, and it's going to have to be like a system that I'm building from the ground up, which is not fast.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think between both of those, it wasn't too stressful. There's still times where, and this probably expands beyond even defining life values, whereas like I feel like I should just be doing more.
Mm-hmm.
And as like, you should read more books and watch more YouTube videos and do more things, because you're running out of time. And it's like, okay, like you need to calm down and probably like go on a run.
Mm.
But so
Yeah.
somewhere in between.
Yeah. What would you say was like one of the hardest parts of losing religion as you knew it, just on like an emotional level?
So I think, and I say all of this because I think most Christians are well-intentioned, but I think for me, the loss of religion was the loss of something that I felt like I had been promised, both from kind of the human perspective of the church telling me, hey, this is what your life can look like. You're going to be like, you have a direct connection with the source of love in all of the universe. And, that should derive you some happiness and wisdom and some of these things. And then, you have different Bible verses to basically back that up with. To be like, wait a second, I don't think this is the case. And now I've been living my life. I've spent 20 some odd years under some baseline assumption, and then to like, just, it's not that the rug was pulled out from under me, because nothing really changed externally to myself. It's just how I felt, in that I thought I had some of these things when in reality I don't know that I did.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So it's a loss of something, even if that's something I'm at the point I'm like, I don't know that I ever necessarily had it.
Uh-huh.
They're the ancillary pieces like related to church that maybe I had, but some of the like direct stuff is like, well, I don't know that was ever there. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting hearing people's experiences, because I definitely think I'm the type of person who overthinks things, or used to, and now I've sort of been living this life of blissful ignorance, and
Yeah.
it's kind of great. And I'm just not worried so much about like what all the big questions. I'm
Yeah.
interested in
Yes.
them, but I mean, a big part of this podcast is like I want to find how people find practical meaning in their day-to-day lives, and like practical steps they take, and that pretty much anyone can test and prove like, oh yeah, if I do this, I'll have a more fulfilled life, and try to aggregate some of those among different people. And even this morning I was interviewing the Hindu priest from the temple here, and it's like, oh, he has a totally different perspective than most people around here, and you learn something from everybody.
Sure.
And there's another just sort of random question.
Okay.
But what's the best conversation you've had in recent weeks?
Oh, it's a good question. I feel like I have lots of good conversations with my sister. So I won't speak completely on her behalf on where she has landed spiritually, but at the very least, it's not, I think, in the realm of where we grew up. And being able to speak to someone that has a similar but different background, in terms of growing up in the same family and having the interactions with our siblings and our parents, and having those kind of shared experiences, but then having some of these kind of later in life, whereas like, I don't know what I think anymore. And here are my things that I'm thinking now, and here are my fears that come with that, and here are the things that are hard with that, and here are the things that, you got to keep talking to your therapist about. And so I think somewhere in there, I don't know that that's like a single conversation, but kind of an amalgamation of lots of the conversations that I've had with her.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'd wanted to loop back around to the businessy stuff. With the Airbnb, because again, that's like practical hands-on things. So first off, just the housing market is crazy for one, and it's hard enough to buy a house, let alone get into real estate. But what sort of advice would you give to people who are maybe looking to get in that, and just say, the deck's kind of stacked against me, but like I want to do something instead of nothing? And what are things that you've found that like, hey, this worked, or don't try this, don't buy a vending machine?
And the vending machines, I'm not even saying don't buy it. It's just understand the benefit to cost. So, but to answer your question, I think the like very basic piece is, and I'm sure I'm wildly biased here, is to be more of a ready, fire, aim person. And I say all of that as I feel like I'm an engineer and I want to throw everything in a spreadsheet and actually like understand what risks I'm taking. So know who you are as a person. I understand that like even the ventures that I do pursue tend to be relatively low risk. But that being said, is I think just like get out there and start doing stuff. So for us, there's a lot of things that Daniel and I didn't know how to do on houses, but as we've mentioned so many times, YouTube exists, and I've learned so many things on YouTube on how to build or how to do or how to, just figure things out. And is it always perfect? No, but is it functional most of the time? Yes. Or is it something that's like so broken that it's not fixable? And almost never is it that much. That, and then I think like just dig into it, be creative. And this is going to sound funny, and I recognize that there's an inherent that you and I, like when we bought our houses, was several years ago before housing prices even increased as much as they have. But once you like get into it, or once you're thinking about getting into buying a house, whether that's for business related reasons or not, is like just wildly lower your standards. So there are so many people that I have talked to at work that, they have to have a, 4-bedroom, 2-bath, like XYZ house. And it's like, okay, man, that's your prerogative. And I get that. And I think everyone can define what they are going to pursue for themselves. But if you're waiting for that, or if you're trying to like save up money to get that, in a place like Northwest Arkansas where the real estate prices are like increasing as drastically as they are, I don't know that you're going to save enough. Like, I don't know that you're ever going to catch that line. So I've told several people at work that, especially some of our younger engineers, is like, just buy a house, get into like anything, get into like a little 2-bed, 1-bath that's 800 square feet, and ideally it's a dump, and you can fix it up.
Yeah.
And go from there, because you're going to learn how to do stuff. It's probably going to appreciate in value, and then you can buy a nicer house or, nicer apartment, duplex, whatever it is, if it's more business related. And yeah, just be creative with that. The first house that I bought was a 4-bed house, well, 3-bed, and then I converted a garage to the last room, and I lived in that room. And I had 2 roommates, and we Airbnb'd 1 room out. And it was really hard because we had 1 bathroom, and that's hard with 4 people, but it was doable. Like, and I mean, even now, like, I still have a roommate. I'm 31 years old, and that has kept my housing cost to be like $400 a month, which is less than most people for like what they're paying in an apartment. And I say that our house is a bit of a disaster right now. It's very mid renovation, but I've lowered my own standards, and I think it will allow us to have a much nicer house in the long run.
It's like the Bo Burnham song where he's like, if you want love, lower your expectations.
Yeah, he's probably not wrong.
Because Prince Charming wouldn't settle for you. It's a good one. And your roommate, you don't just live with a roommate, you live with a roommate who's married.
Yes.
And so like, even married people, you got to do what you got to do to just get in there. And we were glad that we found a house, because we definitely had to lower expectations. And it was depressing for several years saving up, because it was like, you save up for a house and you're like, oh, we're not quite there, let's save up 1 more year. And you get to the next year, and then the housing market has moved just as much as that is.
Or more.
Yeah, and you're like, we should have just done it then.
Yep. And it's a give and take, but I think there are still so many ways to be creative and to be, to find ways to make things work, because, and, at the risk of sounding like, some boomer that's like, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That's not exactly what I'm saying, where it's like, listen, there's lots of things that are not great societally that have not set up even the generation below us to succeed. But again, within the things that you can actually control, is like, you're not going to fix a lot of those societal things on your own. Or if you do, you're like starting a movement. But unless you're starting a movement, it's probably not going to change those things that specifically. So you have to figure out something to make it work.
There's so many things in life that are going to be stacked against you. Right now, it happens to be the housing market. And it's like, I can cross my fingers and hope that it gets better. And it may, and I hope it does. I hope people do the right thing, just
absolutely
nationally. But knowing politics and like, people don't do the right thing. And so this may just be how things are, and you just got to bite the bullet and do what you can. And but on kind of a final note, what's our penultimate final note? Because one more question, going back to some of the meaning stuff, of what's something that you felt was really important 10 years ago that no longer is really that important to you, and then vice versa, something that wasn't on your radar that now you're realizing, like, this is really important to me.
Yeah.
You can answer them one at a time.
So, I mean, 10 years ago, I think religion was extremely important to me. In the words from the Bible, I would like to think that I wasn't a lukewarm Christian and, wasn't looking to be spat out. So I think I took it very seriously. I, read the Bible cover to cover several times because I wanted to understand and imbue the meaning of that text into my life. And that's something that I look at now where I can appreciate some of the historical piece, and I still think that there are churches that do good. And, even the church that I came from, I would like to think is doing community good. But obviously for me, it's not something that is carrying any specific importance right now, especially in the context of what I think the American church is in so many ways. So I would say that that's probably the biggest thing, 2013 to, or yeah, 2013, 2014 to today. And then something that's really important today, I think in the search for some of this meaning stuff and how we think about our lives, I think even by not being in the church where you're just given exactly what your meaning is in so many senses, but having to seek it out for yourself and kind of process through the different thought pieces through history and through how kind of humanity has grappled with different things as they've happened, whether, that was big historical things and then kind of how society reacted to them. I think that that's something that has become more important to me is understanding the underlying kind of philosophical movements and how they have affected how we as humans think about ourselves. Not so much that they have the ultimate specific meaning given to you on a platter like religion, I think, attempts to do, but it both asks the question and forces you to self-examine kind of how you live life and what you think about living life. And so I think it's, given the removal of the first piece and the thing that was so important before, and kind of what fills that gap, and I don't even know that I would define it as filling it, because it hasn't replaced it. It's in a lot of senses created more questions than answers.
Uh-huh.
But it's actually forced me to deal with what I think about these things and to have a maybe more open-handed view as to how humanity got to where we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a big realization I came to was that I think there's almost an illusion of homogeneity, if that's a word, or that people growing up in church, I had this mindset that we all think alike.
Yep.
But I started realizing there's all kinds of different people here who believe all sorts of different ways we should be living and thinking, and everyone's kind of just picking and choosing what they believe.
Yeah.
And so why not just pick and choose what you genuinely think is the best for the world and society? And obviously, you're biased and you're not this flawless person who's seeing everything clearly, but you can only do what you can do. And so that's kind of become the North Star of sorts of what brings about the most human flourishing. That'd probably be my value phrase. It's
the one sentence
brings about the most human flourishing in a genuine way. And then sort of last question of, what's a practical challenge you might like to offer to people that would just that would broaden their perspective or make them a more loving person? It could be whatever, literally anything, just as long as it's practical. I like practical challenges.
A tool that I have been using that I also, to some degree, created is something that I use every year. It's called my year in review. Mm-hmm. So we just met to discuss this, you and I and spouses and Daniel and so on. And I think that that's been one of my biggest frameworks for understanding myself, and then also just kind of carrying an actual history of my year.
Mm.
And so kind of the way this ties into some of the things that we've been talking about is my year in review. I do top moments, top songs, top books, worst moments, and then a variety of questions of, what went well this year, what went poorly this year, what would you like to do better next year?
Mm.
In the past, there have been questions on, how was my relationship with God? And it forces you to sit down. For me, it's usually from like mid-November to like the end of January, and kind of wrestle with how my year went and what I think about that, and maybe understand, especially in the context of as you develop some of these values, is my value system and my year in review in alignment? And if it's not, do I need to change my upcoming year, or do I need to change my value system?
Mm-hmm.
And an example of that's like not heavy at all. One of my goals, also New Year's resolutions or year-long resolutions. One of my resolutions for like 3 years was to go camping a certain number of times. And then every year I kept reviewing it and being like, wow, I didn't go camping. And at some point I was like, I don't think I actually like camping as much as I think I like camping.
Yeah.
Because I keep making this resolution and I keep failing to do it. And at the end of the day is like, I just am not making time to go camping. Like that's just the reality. And it was like, and I think I'm okay with that. Like, but it helped me to understand maybe who I thought of myself versus who I actually was, and kind of come a little bit more in alignment.
Yeah.
So I like that as a tangible, like practical thing, because it goes into lots of other spheres. You have to read at least 10 books to have top 10 books.
Yeah.
You have to listen to things, watch some YouTube videos, define some of these things that you want or are your tops, so that you can understand who was I in 2017, 2018, and see how that has progressed over the years.
Yeah, I had a friend who came to a realization of like, I don't think I need to go hiking to like live my best life. Like everyone tells me that I need that, but it's just not for me, and I can respect that.
Yep.
And I actually did earlier in 2023, I did a 30-year in review.
Okay. I love that.
Where I part of this was because I basically made a video journal of like highlights of my life up to 30.
Okay.
And this is embarrassing to admit, but it was like 8 hours.
Dang,
and
I love that.
I spent like 2 hours a day for a week just recording stuff, because it sounds really narcissistic, and maybe it is, but I think it stems from just hardly knowing anything about my grandparents and wanting there to be history for my kids and them know what was going on and what I did and mistakes and like lessons learned and just funny stories and everything in between. And so that was a lot of fun and gave a lot of self-perspective on like, whoa. I looked through all of my yearbooks and took little notes, and which one of the best ones, there's a picture from my senior year. I don't know how this got printed, but I was in overall, it was for some sort of float thing. I was in just overalls, like no shirt, and kind of like stroking my leg. And the caption that I said that they put in, it said, it's free to look, but it'll cost to touch. And it's memorialized forever in the 2011 Harbor Yearbook. So
great.
It's immortal. Anyway, that's really all I got. So I was glad to have a good conversation, and I hope your business continues to go well, and all your other things, and can't wait to hear about your 2024 year-end review.
That's right. We get together every year sit in a hot tub and go through them. So
yep,
that's always a good time.
Yep. Well, yeah. Thanks for coming, and talk to you next time.
Thanks for having me.